Hey gamers, it's Gaming with the Guys, and this is Gaming Greg, and we are back. It has been several months since we have put anything out. Life does happen, even to gamers. I could go through the whole talk about what's been happening with us, but to be honest, there's a lot. Long and the short of it is, got my gaming terrain, got my stuff, and hopefully we're going to start doing some battle reports and other fun things here in the near future. But today, we are back with a Bungles After Dark, and this is a Bungles After Dark that I've been looking forward to doing for quite a while. We had this idea, we were able to reach out to a bunch of people, so we have a lot of guests on. We're going to be talking about being a Grand Masters, because Gaming Greg eventually one day is no longer going to be running a Grand Masters tournament, but he may actually want to participate. And I said to myself, Self, you suck. How can you get better? How can you be best of the best? And I have no clue whatsoever. So I thought, you know what, let's gather together as many grandmasters as possible so we could pick their brain and see what they do, what magic, what voodoo, whatever they're doing to get to that level. How do they build their lists? Are they playing against other people? Do they play a lot of lists? Do they just play one faction and nothing else? So to help with that, I'm first going to drag in my close personal grandmaster.
Whoa, that sounds a little bit off. Like I'm your personal grandmaster. Just
You are my
I'm gonna leave it at that. But Happy
That's a
New
little
Year's,
creepy.
everybody. Yeah, I know it's a little creepy, isn't it?
Happy New Year, everybody. Yeah, we did have the holiday season, which of course throws a monkey wrench into everything.
Exactly.
So
But yep, I'm here. I'm ready to go, and I was very fortunate that I had a good connection with my network of people. So I think today's
Jason
going to be a
is
good episode.
Jason is the networker. So joining us is another Grandmaster. We have Grandmaster Olaf. Hello, Olaf. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Jason.
Welcome,
Good
sir.
man.
Welcome to the induction circle of Grandmasters.
That's where
So
you
you're
get
one of
everything
us
from
now.
me. One
One
of
of
us.
us.
One of us. Now we're going to add in the Grandmaster Cody.
This is the magic you were talking about,
That is the
right?
magic I was talking about. No, that is not the magic.
No, that's not magic at all. That's like an illegal substance in several countries, I'm sure.
That's cardboard crack and nothing more. And then also joining us, Grandmaster Al. Al, thank you for joining us. Great to have you here. And then last, but surely not least, Grandmaster Craig. Craig, thanks for joining us again.
Hey.
Good to have you. So to kind of get things rolling, I'm just going to have you each. I mean, we've given everybody's names, but just kind of I'm gonna roll. So we already talked about this ahead of time because there's going to be some questions. We're not going to sure who's going to jump forward first. So Gaming Greg here has the die of power, and I'm going to be rolling that to see who I'm going to force to talk. It's kind of like being in school. No one wants to talk. No one wants to raise their hand and say, "Hey, what did I do this summer?" No. So I'm going to solve that with a die roll. And based on my screen here, Gaming Jason will be 1. Olaf will be 2, Craig will be 3. Al, again, you get to be 4. I don't know how that happened. And Grandmaster Cody will be 5. If I magically roll a 6, I may blather about something.
That's great because
you
never roll 6s.
Me rolling a 6 is an oddity. All right, so this is going to be just kind of an introduction. Guys, introduce yourself. If you remember what year you won your Grandmaster and what faction you're playing, give it a shout out and we'll go from there. So starting with Craig. What's your
Thanks.
Grandmaster resume?
So it was UK Grand Masters January last year.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was up in Stockport near Manchester.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your faction that you won with?
So it was.
He doesn't remember.
It was Uray.
Yeah. All right.
It was Uray, but I'm about to say it was kind of running heavy. So yeah, but it did have some other Uray models in.
And that's going to be something that I want to talk about too when we're talking about Masters lists. It does get a little convoluted. What faction did I win with, especially when you're doing with the Ronin lists and things like that. So that's kind of it's an interesting quirk on Bushido, at least I think. So all right, next up. Oh, Grandmaster Cody.
Oh, yeah. So I won at Adepticon 2022, I think, whatever the first post-COVID Adepticon was. I won with Temple, and I will be returning with Temple in 2024.
We refer to that win as the year of the oxen.
I only had one cow and no Rojan, so
It was the build up to it when you were running 2 and you had our local meta crying and most of them wanting to quit.
yeah, I was playing the villager list. It was stupid.
All right, so that's 2022. All right, Al, what was yours?
The UK was UK Masters 2022. Both was it January and then like I don't know, like September or something for the second one. So 2 Masters in the UK 2022, and then what, second in 2023, and then
okay,
third in 2023.
What were your winning factions?
The winning factions were, the very first one was Minamoto, and the second one was the Protector of Ear.
Okay. Excellent. All right, we're going to go with Olaf. We're going to save Gaming Jason because I hear him enough bragging about things. So, Olaf, what was your Grandmaster credentials?
I won the German Grandmaster happening the 16th of September last year, as in 2023, because that is now last year.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And there was a tournament in Würzburg.
Excellent.
I won it with a list that was not too far off what Greg won with in the UK. But this one was Silver Moon Trade Syndicate with focus on the brothers, the Hozumi Ronin theme.
Okay, excellent. Very nice. Okay, last Gaming Jason.
Yep. I won Adepticon 2023 with pure Silver Moon. So
pure Silver Moon.
No Ronin stuff. I have to be saying that. Yeah. Yep. Pure Silver Moon, not the I'm going to play Ronin and then take all the fun Silver Moon cards.
Purely on the power of Wasapu.
Yes, purely on the power of Wasapu. Praise be his name.
You won with Wasapu, not Silver Moon.
Wasapu is yet to be its own faction, but that may be happening.
Yeah, when Wasapu becomes his own faction
someday.
Then I'll just go ahead and shelf the rest of my Silver Moon. And like, what faction you play? I play Wasapu. That's it.
And just I don't think I'm giving away any secrets or breaking any NDAs by saying Jason is not making a powered up Super Saiyan Wasapu, so no one has to worry about that for his figure.
What? Second one?
Wasapu 2.
I was thinking about just telling them like, all right, so for my Grandmaster's model, I just want to go ahead and just have Wasapu pre-nerf, and I'm cool with that. That's my Grandmaster model. We got 2 of them running around.
I'm never an M60.
2 of them.
2 of them running around with strafes, but one of them can actually pierce Minimoto armor.
There you go.
Should have made a Buto Wasapu.
I thought about that too. I also thought about making an urchin, I thought about making an urchin Buto after someone was talking about it. It made me think of the episode of South Park where the kids were all playing Ninja.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, I could just make Cartman. So that did come up as an idea too.
There you go. All right. Well, that's our panel for today's discussion. Hopefully we might be doing some other of these in the near future, but for today we're going to be talking about how they were able, what did they do, what tricks, if they had any, to build their Grandmasters lists, or as someone asked it, one of the community questions was, how do I not come in last? Which that's always Gaming Greg's aim, and his solution was run the tournament. That's what I do. I can never come in last if I'm running the tournament. But what we're going to do is we've kind of broken it down. I've broken it down into 2 groups, and there's a series of questions under each of these groups. Group 1 questions are related to tournament prep for Grandmasters. What do you do to kind of get yourself prepared for it? And the second group of questions is playing the meta. How do you deal with the meta? Does the meta even play into your planning for things? I know at least in our local meta recently, we've got Adepticon coming up here end of March, and the discussion's already going to be, well, with this coming out or with this new model coming out, I can't play this, and this is nullifying that. So group 2 questions are going to be kind of dealing with meta kind of deals and how you plan for that a little bit. If we have time, group 3 is just going to be, we did get some questions from the community, so we're going to throw those out as we have time. And if we don't already cover it in our first 2 group questions. All right. With that being said, gentlemen, Group 1 questions are related to tournament prep, and we kind of gave you an outline of what's happening, so hopefully that helped, and it doesn't catch anybody off guard. But the first question, and this is probably one, this was one of my big questions that I always have when I'm building, and it's just from watching what happens in our local meta, and that's probably a discussion for another day. Is how do local metas differ and how do they affect your gameplay? And a great example is how is it different between the UK or Europe and the North America? But for now, first question would be, in general, when you're prepping for a tournament, do you focus on playing one faction for whatever reasons, or do you play many factions up ahead of it and then start paring your choices down? I could tell. I'm gonna preempt two players here. Here in North America, the North American Grand Masters, I will say, represent one of each. And I'll let them kind of describe their own thing, and you can kind of figure it out what it is. But to answer that question, I'm going to roll that die right off the table. Al, you get to address that one first. So how do you approach it? Do you just focus in on one faction and play it to death? Or do you play a whole bunch and or you have two or three and then just play them around until you find one that you really like the day before?
Predominantly, I'll swing back and forth between factions during the rest of the year, and then on the month preceding to Grandmaster, maybe I'll just say, right, okay, this is the list or this is the faction I'm going to play. How am I going to make a particularly strong list with this? And I suppose there's more considerations coming in with this kind of latest format that Jason's proposed, where you get two lists. I haven't really looked into it, but yeah, I would predominantly say I'll play the rest of the year, find something I like, generally a couple of models, and then go, right, how we build a list around these so they're kind of fun. And then from there, I'll generally focus in on one faction and say, right, okay, well, are there counters to this faction? Is there something that needs to be refined here to give it its best chance at winning? And if I find something, I'm like, this is kind of a dead end in terms of playability, or this is hard countered by this, which comes up often, then we might be back to the drawing board and then kind of revisiting the list design from there. Okay. Or limiting the chances of running into something that's going to be a real difficult for you.
Yeah, and that's something. It's always hard because, especially in the larger tournaments, you get a good variety of factions. You never know exactly what you're going to meet, because at least that first round pairing, you never know what's going to happen with that. You could get something that's easy for your list to handle, and then it just changes throughout the day. As you're getting it until you get towards the end and you have a clearer picture of what's going on. So yeah, that's hard to build for. Am I going to run into my hard counter? Is really rough. All right. Well, that would be me. We don't need any anecdotes from me. Grandmaster Cody, I will ask you the same question. How I already know what you do. You're not too dissimilar from Al, but you're far.
I'd say Al's
far
more
last
focused. Yeah, Al's much more focused than Cody because
So I play every faction. Mostly because certain people only play one faction, so I don't get to play against other stuff, and I need to figure out combos and all of the game breaking mechanics and all of that fun stuff. But in all actuality, my dice just suck, so I need kata. So basically, Temple is just the only faction that works for me.
It's defaulted to saving you.
Yeah, I roll way too many ones. So that's kind of. I also really like the models, and that's kind of what I build my list around now. Is just do they have cool models? Yes, then that's what I'm playing. So,
okay,
yeah,
no, that's good. I mean, and this is just going to be me postulating something, and we could talk about it possibly later. You win that first Grand Masters. That's great. Now it frees you up to do whatever you want, so you can play. And that my question would be then for later. Once you win something like that, when you when you start to look at what you want to play in the future, and I know this used to come up sometime with War Machine all the time. Oh, well, this faction is totally trash and it's unplayable. Well, then somebody goes and champions that one and then goes and kicks everybody's ass with that particular faction that everybody said, well, they sucked. And, well, okay, now that they did that, that's no longer a thing. But that's something we could talk about maybe in group 3 questions. All right,
Except
so
Crix. No one ever says that about Crix.
no one said that about Crix. Okay, today I'm rolling. All right, Jason.
So I'm probably the odd one out, and aka I'm the cheap ass. So
I was going to say we're cheap and poor.
I'm tried and true. I master my one faction, and I just go with it until I understand everything else. And then once I understand what I'm weak against, that it makes it almost a little bit easier. Where it's like I know what I'm definitely weak against, and so even if it comes up in some other flavor of whatever certain factions are played or represented, it's like, yeah, I know I'm going to be in for a bad time, but I at least got an idea of what I need to do. Also, I remember all my rules because I don't have to worry about all the other crap. So then it's just like, I just have to bank that on my opponent forgetting something. And then also being Silver Moon, the faction is designed by the fact where it's like, I am very much controlled by how much my luck is and probability. So it's like, there's no point in me stressing on this because it's like, this is either going to go big or it's not going to go big at all. And it's just like, I'm going to lose either way. So,
yeah,
and I mean that's only happened in my Grandmasters. That in the one and probably the deciding round, there were 2 big moments in there, and that's pretty much what set me on course then to kind of put me in that position to get to the finals and win.
Yeah,
so,
the finals. I was going to say the finals probably wasn't as much. It was still a tough game and a good opponent, but you had already gone up against his version of a list because they were both playing Temple Masters. You had played Temple Masters earlier.
No, I played Temple Masters in round 2. Round 4, I played Ninja.
Oh, that's right. I thought,
Yeah.
okay. I thought
No, if I had played Temple,
I thought somebody else was on that top table, and I was
no.
wrong.
I think I don't know either the points or you felt pity and you're just
no,
like,
I did
all right,
not feel pity.
Shuffle.
It was
otherwise
He did not feel pity because of who he matched me up against.
I did not feel pity. It was purely by the points. Trust me.
So, but I don't see a problem with that, especially for people that are getting into the game. I mean, at this point, yeah, I could have probably a while ago like branched out into other factions, and I thought about that. But then our local mill, everybody else has everything anyway, so it's like, if I want to, just for a collection's sake, that's cool. Otherwise, I'm cool with my faction. And plus, as Cody would say, after you figure out all the broken stuff, well, 90% of the broken stuff in Bushido somewhere lives in the Silver Moon realm that other people can get through Ronin. So, voila, I have shown you all the broken stuff you need, and even in weird ways that no one would probably reasonably do.
There you go. All right, so playing multiple, playing single. We're just gonna go Olaf. What do you kind of do? Do you do everything? Do you own everything and then play it down until you get to that, or are you of the Jason mind where I'm just gonna play this one thing so I will know it all?
I play mainly Silver Moon.
Okay.
I own a bit of She-Ho because I wanted to branch and have a different playing style, and they're different. I used to play Savage Wave,
Okay.
but I moved away from that. So to answer the question, I choose a faction, and then I'm going to go with that faction for that tournament.
Okay.
So and then I start looking what does this faction do? What concept can I come up with that a list will do well at? And I start working on that, and then I fail a bunch of times coming up with strategies that really didn't work.
All part of the process, and very
yeah,
important.
precisely. And I think it's very closely related to what Al said earlier. It's like you play something, you're like, oh, this is cool, and then you're like, oh, but we have a very heavy counter right there. What do I do if that happens? And if you realize, if I come up against this counter, I'm basically done for. Then I have to go back to the drawing board and go like, okay, I need to refine this concept so that it would still work if I would run up against something that is just gonna bash me all over the place.
Okay.
So I think strategy-wise, starting to hone down to the list I will actually play in the end, it's a matter of choosing the faction just to limit my possibilities, to not be all over the place, and then working it down from there, removing concepts that are not going to work out, while sort of retaining something that I still find interesting and fun to play.
Okay, no, that makes absolute sense. It's a solid way to build it, and again, it allows you to kind of do what Jason does. Is once you lock in on that thing, yeah, you could tinker with some of the pieces, like you said, different concepts and whatnot, but you got your rules down. And as I always say, one of the things I say, and it was something that our guys in our meta used to do in some of the tournaments, is, and it probably gets repeated by everybody, know your stuff. If you know your stuff, that's a majority of the battle right there. If you're not forgetting rules, you're not going, oh, I forgot to do combo attack. So now you're writing it on your hand, so it looks like you're a tattooed Yakuza because you got stuff written all up and down your arms and hands to remind yourself, oh, do this, do that, whatever. If you've played your faction enough where you can do that over and over, that's great. Counter to that is if you play a whole bunch of factions, ahead of time, or even going into that, you got a good idea inside of what everybody else is doing, but you may not master your own stuff. So that's why I thought this would be kind of an interesting question. So we're going to turn that over to Craig, last but not least. Craig, what's your insights there? You're on mute. Don't forget. See how I did that save there?
Thanks for that. Professional. So I think so. I guess for context, I play most of the factions, maybe just 2 that I don't play. Okay. I do jump around, and I do quite a lot of play testing. So a lot of my regular games are with sort of serve a purpose, but not necessarily getting me ready for a Grand Masters, because it may not be hugely relevant. But they're fun, and I'm happy to do that. That's kind of one of the nice ways of kind of keeping things interesting and fresh. I think when I start to think more about Grand Masters, I've taken a few different approaches. I've tried to build a machine list, sort of got a good idea, trying to build the components of it, and sort of execute that, and that was really good fun. So I had a neat little Savage Ways list that was doing some quirky, weird stuff, which I think Olaf you played into. So that was a really, really great game. And then I've tried to home in more onto a faction, and I think with Shiho, when I took them to the Grand Masters in the UK, I really just said I'm going to play Guerrilla Warfare, and then worked on it for a few months and really kind of homed in on what makes them work as a bit of a challenge, just because it was kind of it still was quite new at the time, I felt, and I don't know how new it really was, but with gaming opportunities at that point, it felt like something to explore. And I think at other times I've sort of just had a concept with the Blood Brothers. I actually was playing them in Savage Wave with Kimono and Ushi as a kind of control kind of thing, and then I sort of thought, actually, I think I could get what I like from those guys and put it into Ure and actually see how it works there, because I kind of was also playing with a few Ure lists at the time, so I actually kind of cross-pollinated the list to produce something a bit different. And more recently, I took an Ito list, and that was sort of more back to, let's talk about synergies and making things work. But I suppose that's probably where I was just keen to try out some of the latest balance erratas. Okay. So I guess there's lots of different things you can do, but I suppose the way I was always thinking about it is, you probably broadly, you may be trying to build a machine, or you may set very tight parameters to work in, then innovate within that, or you may just kind of stick with something and I think generally it's best to stick with something I think it's quite risky to go for anything outside of that, but there's a lot of good options.
Okay, excellent. No, I appreciate all the insights on that. It helps. Like I said, I'm of the mind of you, Craig. I like sticking with what I know, and it also helps that I'm cheap as all get out, so I just have the one faction and maybe another one just to spice things up a little bit. And I'm also lucky that our local community has players like Cody and a couple others that play everything. So I get to play it.
Or we expand our factions when Cody's like, all right, yeah, I want to go over this paint scheme again. So do you guys want to buy the whole faction off of me?
I appreciate that.
There
Or
we
trade
go.
for unpainted models.
Or hey, how about you give me Cody gives me his painted models and I give him all my unpainted models. And let me tell you, I have a pile of unpainted models. So
Yeah.
Don't we all?
I think that may also play into a lot of people's planning, is especially for Adepticon, because Adepticon has the required painting.
Oh yeah.
And it's the, all right, what do I have painted and what can I paint between now and then? I hear the stories of, people buying a new release model. The Grand Masters is on a Friday and they release the model when the hall opens on Thursday, and people staying up all night spray painting in their bathroom of their hotel and, to prime it.
I've done that.
Yeah, I didn't do it in I didn't do it in a hotel, but I have bought like a new model and actually like finished it within like 12 hours and then went back to the con and be like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I brought my airbrush with me and painted a lot of stuff. I think was that 2018 or 2019. I don't remember. I was playing in way too many tournaments, and yeah, I had to finish painting everything. So
there have been some people, and at least for Adepticon, where like the hotel staff had to kick some people out because like somebody like went crazy with the airbrush, or they went crazy with the lacquer because they had to lacquer everything.
Yeah, it's like I said, Adepticon is. Not every, and again, it's a Midwest American kind of con, but it gets quite the following. And again, there's nothing quite like it. I mean, you'll see other people who do their podcasting and blogs and things like that, and they will turn the bathrooms of the hotels into painting rooms. It's what they do to those places. They should be shot. They're horrible people. but between the drinking at Adepticon, which
I think someone put it best. It was like a college party. It's like someone just openly came up to me. It's like, here you go.
Yeah, it's a college university fraternity party gone with.
I mean, we used to have the cooler on wheels as our display board.
Yep, I remember that year. And then I think this last year, I know I stashed like a bottle or two of tequila in my backpack for Adepticon.
Yeah, that was I've noticed. So yeah, that's the last thing, and we'll get on the second question in this group here. The post game drinking of the North American Grand Masters is almost getting legendary.
What about in Europe? Is it that legendary? Because I see some people where it's like, oh, we had a nice talk during lunch and this and that, but I don't hear anything about it like sounding like a rager, or it's just maybe the Europeans know how to drink and we're slods. We're savages out here.
We're savages.
I mean, I haven't been. No, the cons are like I've gone to, but this is like as I got mature, are relatively tame. I have been to like the War Machine, like WTCs in the past, which have been like you end up naked and like saunas and stuff like that, and excessive drinking, and Americans are puking outside your room at 4 a.m.
That sounds normal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there was a place for it. Maybe just not the ones I've been to. Like,
people have grown out of it, and I won't say we're getting really that bad. But there was a lot of pressure being released. I do say I keep. So we have a little Japanese grocery not too far from the convention site, and last year I got sake juice boxes, and there were some players that I knew that were not doing as well as they thought they would. So about round 3, 4, it's like, here's a juice box, pal. This is for you. You need that. They enjoyed those a lot. So, we try to, not that I want them to play poorly, but they were not doing what they wanted to do, but they were having fun. So here's a little juice box for you. It'll be okay.
Is it edible sake? I find sake to be I love like Japanese plum wine, but sake is just like paint stripper to me.
That's okay. Thank you. I am not the only person who thinks that. I will say there were some guys who go over to Japan a lot, and they brought sake in. Some of the stuff they brought totally changed my life view on sake because it was excellent stuff. But yeah, by and large, I remember the first time I had sake, it's like, this is turpentine. I don't see the appeal. It's just warm. All right. So that's a good idea. So we were talking about, how do you focus playing one faction? Do you play many? Next thing, and I think this one's probably going to be a universal answer, but I had to put it in there just because I wanted to make sure. Do you feel playing a large number of games helps in prepping for a tournament? Do you have to pay, and for whatever reasons, why is playing the large number of games? Craig, we're going to start with you on this one. So do you play a monstrous amount of games prior to, or are you able to play a monstrous amount of games prior to?
I wish. I mean, yeah, it's all relative, I suppose. So maybe, well, what I like to do is try to get a game in like every week or two, which is good. If I can do that, that's really good. Leading up to a tournament, I like to kind of like do a bit of a boot camp, and sort of like normally I get someone who's actually really keen to get 3 or 4 games in a day, and we just try to do that for a day, maybe 2 if we're really lucky. Normally they end up way more experienced than me at the end of it and go and do really well, so it sort of works. It works because I'll just play random stuff and they take out their big guns because we're just more testing things. But it's just tricky with sort of general life and everything these days. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, some of the games they used to play, you'd get players. You may be on 13 games for the year, and they'd be on 300 already, or something like that. So I know there's some people do a lot of reps. I'm never going to do that. But I do try to get at least a few games in with my tournament list, just to make sure, to the points made earlier, just so I know what the timings are, the quirks of the rules, all that kind of stuff. I've got it clear in my head so that I can play a smooth game. And I'm focused more on the scenario and my opposition and things like that. I'm not worrying about my own stuff so much because I've got that in my mind clear. So that's generally how it tends to work for me.
Okay, good. No, that's and maybe my wording and no, you answered perfectly well. I'm just thinking of more my wording. Maybe it's better if I said, does playing a lot of games. I like how you do it. So you get a few games in. You're trying to get a game or 2 in a week, but then right towards crunch time, it sounds like you're really, homing in on it and playing a whole ton of games ahead of time, and that prior to the con to just finalize everything. If I've kind of repeated that correctly.
Well, that's right. Yeah, you sort of get into the zone a bit more closer to the time.
And would you think somebody who plays more regularly than somebody else, and I think this kind of is an obvious one, somebody who plays more regularly than someone who maybe gets in a game a month as compared to somebody who plays like 2 games a week, that person who probably plays more often is going to have a little more of an advantage. Again, it also depends on who they're playing against too, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't really replace kind of just playing games, because it's where you put your models on the table, your positioning, your sequencing, thinking on the spot. Plus, you often discover quirky things or kind of see something that maybe has caught you out once but wouldn't next time, that kind of stuff. So I always think you can't really replace kind of getting some reps in and actually some gaming time. Theory is good though, and definitely if you hang out on Discord enough, you'll see a lot of little quirks in the rules or interactions and ideas and things like that, which is really good. So that certainly can kind of help and complement. But for me anyway, I think actually like it's important to get as many games as possible in beforehand, particularly if something's new. And there's always seems to be little things changing, like the scenery rules or the scenarios, or something new's come out. So there's always something that you kind of want to get comfortable with before you go into a big timed event. I guess that's the ideal anyway. Whether it works out in practice, it all depends if people can make schedule, the time and schedules and everything. But that's what I aim for.
All right, cool.
I almost want to say, for anybody who wants to learn English, for English comprehension, should just go through the rules and questions section of the Bushido Discord, and boom, that's like a college level course right there for you.
Very, very good. Yeah. Absolutely. Cody, how about you? I know how much we play, or we used to play.
Yeah, I haven't played since. Well, I haven't played Bushido since October. I haven't played miniature anything since November, but with Adepticon, it'll be crunch time. So I do like to get at least 1 game in a week. Obviously, if I can swing like a weekend and we play all day, that's great. But something else that I do is I actually have a 2 foot by 2 foot board It's just a piece of wood, and I have all of the scenarios drawn out on it, and I'll play through the first turn or two of just movement, trying to figure out, like, obviously I throw random terrain out. It's never going to be the same as the day of the tournament, but just what would I do if, there's a house in the middle of the freaking board, which is a Greg special, or things like that. So I'll play through like the first 2 turns, just movement, and that's kind of something that I do from time to time.
That's good. No, that's helpful. I was wondering if anybody, if solo play where you could play each side of it, or even if you're just planning out your first moves for whatever, if that's something that's done. So I didn't. That's something we didn't know. Grandmaster Cody did.
I definitely do that, and
Okay.
everyone takes a mick out of me for doing it. But some lists they're really dependent on. I think we were talking about this last time. It's you don't want to make kind of a couple of moves on the first turn and realize you're a millimeter out on some key interaction, or you've got the ordering just wrong, and it's like, oh, hold on a minute, just take this back, kind of thing. You don't want to be in that situation. So, plus, I think it kind of helps you kind of just dry run things and sort of, can this list is a great idea, but can it actually do scenario, and does it make sense on the table, that kind of stuff. So it's quite good to do, and particularly if you don't have many games, you can sort of you can read out some of the concepts rather than you use up your gaming time on them.
Okay.
If there's a problem.
It also really helps too with, like, do I walk then run? Do I run? Do I walk? That kind of gives you the perspective of where your models are going to be on the board, and especially when against certain matchups, like a Hagane bomb or stuff like that.
It's
Malusi bomb. That's the new bomb. Hagane's old news. It's all Malusi, baby.
all Malusi all the time. All right, so Olaf, what do you look at? Are you getting a lot of preps in? Are you just playing a lot closer to the con, or is it just kind of year round? What's your take on frequency of playing?
When you get closer to a tournament, I have 2 friends that I know I can call on to be like, okay, we need to have a bunch of games down. So we get together. Hopefully, we get 2 games in an evening. And then I try to do that a few times before the tournament itself happens. Once I've made a decision on what I'm going to bring, I really, really want to play that a few times before the tournament happens. I have a nasty habit of making last minute changes to my list, which is terrible.
I guarantee you're not as bad as Cody on that. I guarantee.
Yeah.
Cody, even though I locked my list in, I want to change this. You locked your list in. I'm still changing it.
Yeah, the Longshanks locking in lists. So I get to see what happens, and Cody's is change. We're 2 months out, and it's Cody will put his list in. That's dumb.
Well, I'm
his
just trolling.
placeholder list. He's trolling a couple guys in the local meta, and then he'll close it off, and then I could see, now he changed his mind again, and he changed his mind again, and now he changed his mind again. All right, that's good.
Yeah, for the upcoming one we're going to do in Manchester, where you have to bring 2 lists, is a terrible situation for me, because I changed my mind last minute, and then now I have to change my mind twice last minute, because obviously what I changed my mind to for the first one will affect what I should bring for the second one, and it's just terrible. So I'm in a place of suffering right now, and I've had a bunch of these, like, hey, come over, play 2 games. Yeah, and then I play 2 games, and I'm like, yeah, this is fun. And then 2 days later, I'm like, I'm not going to bring that list. I just did 2 games with. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that turns out. But yes, I try to focus towards what I have, well, at least attempted to decide on playing. I think, when we've mentioned it earlier, knowing your own mechanics is super important. And especially what Craig mentions when it comes to this, like playing it just solo, just to figure out if you're bringing something that is depending on movement and positioning to win. then playing out the first turn and second turn, just movement wise, can be a really good thing to do. Just to make sure that you can reach those things that you need to reach, and you know how realistic it is. I'm a bit unfortunate in the sense that I don't have a lot of players around where I live. And that is also why I go to a lot of tournaments internationally, because that's when I get to play Bushido.
Okay.
But I'm lucky to have two friends that can support me when it's time.
Excellent. Yeah, that does help trying to find players. You would think so. Chicago is a large, the Chicago metro area. We've got millions and millions of people around. Our Bushido community is
very niche.
So it could be rough, but we still, for I'd say 2022, 2023, we were getting 2 to 3 games in a week, and that's not even including the stuff that like me and Jason would tape, which I would count those as not a good experience for anyone to ever try to learn the game from. Just be entertained by the stupidity that I'm doing.
I mean, it helps some people, I think, in some
people. I'm not going to do that.
That's basically it,
Greg. That's pretty much how it would work.
We touched the hot stoves that way they didn't have to.
Yeah, that helped them there. But I will say, when we walked into when Cody and Jason and some of the other guys in our local meta would come into the tournaments, they would have a huge amount of games under their belt. Whether it would be Jason just playing Silver Moon straight through for a year and playing 2 games a week with that, and then more as we got close to the con, or Cody playing every faction up until the con, and then he maybe narrowed it down to 2 before the day of.
I always bring 3 armies and roll a die.
Roll a die. Yeah. Al, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just repeating mostly. I mean, more reps equals more good, doesn't it? More understanding of your faction first and foremost, but then everything that you know about the opponent is beneficial thereafter. And playing multiple factions can give you that advantage. But yeah, I would say first and foremost, know what you need to do. But then, if you are going to go to that next level, like how do you counter the counter? You have to know your faction, but then you have to know where your main opposition is going to come from your enemy, how to mitigate their strengths. And you really only do that by either reading through stuff, getting to know the faction kind of in a kind of peripheral way, or you play it on the board and go, all right, okay, so that's how that works in practice. So again, more reps equals more good, unfortunately. And I'm sure everyone would be like, oh, I prefer to get more games in, but
I think everybody, I would say everybody would love to get more games in. It's just that's probably the hardest part of it, unless you're doing virtual or anything like that. Jason, I got to skip over you because I already know what your answer is. Is more games good?
Well, I was thinking of that, but also I kind of was thinking of the more stance of, I think there's a certain level, and Al hit that really well. If you just want to play Bushido just to play Bushido, I mean, once you hit a certain threshold of like 100 games, I would say, kind of with the here or there, which is large enough, you're pretty much good for anything else that you want to start tweaking here and there, depending on if you just went with one faction or multiple factions at that point, to kind of like, do I need more games at that point? Which is why, for like my main method for making lists, it's always been, I've got an idea, and then if I get 2 or 3 games in there, then I can decide, okay, am I locking in? Or if it's like, I do actually need to adjust here. Because otherwise I'm notorious for a day of, I know I'm playing my Silver Moon, but it's just like, how do I want to do this? And I'll randomly make up a list. That's exactly what I did for Adepticon 2022. I think that was the most I'd ever play tested a list. And then for the year I won, I mean, it was going to be a completely different list, different idea, but just didn't quite work out until we did like our precursor event. But before then, I maybe played that list like once.
Yeah, that's something that we did for Adepticon, because it's such a big con for our people around here. Is about a month out, we had a small tournament, which, at Adepticon we had 32 people. For this local thing, we had about 8 of our local meta show up, so they could get a bunch of games in prior and kind of test out ideas and things like that. So that helped a bunch. Cocaine Bear, that's where we learned that Kawanarojin in pairs is evil and wrong.
Or just villagers trap spamming.
Villager trap spam.
That was rough.
I was wondering if anybody was going to flip a table on that one.
That was a terrible experience even for myself. I did not enjoy playing that against other people.
He
So
says that, but he came into it. I mean, it was a great learning experience. I was like, I
Yeah.
just to let you know, I feel horrible about myself. Me and Cody playing since we've been kids. I'm like, oh hell no, you're not saying that to me, because you're like, yeah, this is all the revenge for all the bullshit that my dice have done to Cody over the years.
I will always put a dagger in your back.
I know you will. So that's where you're like, oh, I feel bad playing for other players. I'm like, oh, that's such bullshit. You are relishing in the fact that it's like I can't do anything at this point.
It was amazing.
So building on the number of games, getting a number of games, and I think we're all pretty universal on it. The more you can play, the better it's going to be, and then it can give you a leg up on things. Do you find that if you're limited in the I guess the question would better be is, and we're probably drifting a little bit into group 2 questions, because most of the other we're going to start blending things a little bit, just because this question lends itself well here. When you're getting these games in, how much does your local meta help you with your playing? So for example, in our local meta, if you're playing just against me and Jason, we're of absolutely no help, because I play Ito, Jason plays Silvermoon, and we're really not going to go off that unless you're planning on going to a tournament where there's going to be a lot of Silvermoon and a lot of Ito players. And no one plays Ito because they're trash. That's just me. I'm sad. Whereas for me and Jason playing against Cody and a couple of other people in our local meta, it's great experience for us, because they play a whole bunch of different factions all the time to test out this. He'll play Minimoto one week, and then another week he brings in Cult, and another week he brings in Savage Wave, another wing he brings in Ryu. So we're getting the flavor of it. So how does that measure up in your guys' local metas? Does that help? Do you have all those players that play everything? They just play one thing, and does that assistance help you a lot? Olaf, we'll start off with you.
My local meta has holes where there are certain factions that I basically never face. I only go at them at tournaments.
Okay.
And it is a problem, absolutely.
I would say, and the reason why I bring it up is and this goes back to our War Machine days, we would go to a tournament. It was a very competitive tournament called Mayhem Cup. It was between stores in 3 different states. And we would, if your store won, and they had a point structure to it, your store wins the tournament, you get to host the Mayhem Cup, plus you get your name on the traveling trophy. I remember our store would go in, and we had some ringers. We had some really good players in our store. They were very, very good. But because we were very limited in what we played, there were some combos that just caught them dead-footed, and they just got leveled. They did not see it coming. Like the mullet, it was the mullet Karn bullet, and then something else just totally roasted a couple of our guys because no one played that faction, so they were caught unaware. So yeah, I totally get it. It definitely plays into that. Greg, go ahead.
Sorry,
no, go.
It has happened to me. The same thing at tournaments in the past. I've gone a lot to the UK to play in the Grand Masters there, especially GwtG. I've been to so many years, and I do remember at least twice I've been foiled by a ninjas list, just because there was no one in my local meta playing ninjas, and that was basically the only game I lost both those tournaments. And
and ninjas are one of those that if you haven't experienced that before and you're playing against an experienced ninja player,
precisely. But on the other hand, now I've done that a few times, so now I know a little bit more what to expect when ninjas are on the table. And last time it wasn't an issue, so maybe that's a way to do it. Also, just play a lot of tournaments, and that's the way to complement your meta.
Yeah, and I will say you guys probably get with travel across Europe, you probably are able to get to more tournaments. Here in the U.S., there's not a whole lot of Bushido tournaments. There's Adepticon, there's Nova,
whatever we host.
There's local store stuff, but those are not very well traveled. And then because I know we did one for Dragonfall, and we've done, but I don't think LVO's taken it up yet. I know some of the guys on the West Coast have been talking about Las Vegas Open. Sorry, I got to remember not to use all acronyms all the time. But those are kind of the big 3 miniature tournaments, and Gen Con, don't think GCT's run it at Gen Con, and Gen Con is the granddaddy of all gaming conventions, and it's pure insanity when you get 60 to 70,000 people showing up. Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But they're playing everything from board games to role playing to miniature games. I used to go when it was much smaller, when it was only 30 to 40,000. It was in Milwaukee. I've not stepped foot in Indianapolis for that thing. It's insane. All right, so back on track. Enough. That was me rolling a 6 and taking us off a whole different pathway. So Al, how do you think on this? What's your idea about how your local meta affects your play style, and is it important?
Yes, I suppose it is. I'm fortunate enough that I've got kind of one of the games testers and designers in Andy Palmer as part of our local meta, but so we get kind of more insight in than maybe most groups into some things. But Andy's obviously a good player, and there's a lot of kind of good players within our meta, and I feel the more good players you've got, the more chance you have of personal improvement, or to maintain like a high standard of play, because you're going to come up against either better plays in terms of just what is appropriate to the board state at the time, but also in terms of list design and sort of other unique build aspects, where if you're playing kind of net deck stuff all the time, you're not going to be cut out by things. But if someone's like, oh, I've come up with the following, it's pretty nasty, and you see it and you go, okay, right, well, what's my counter to that? And then you've got that kind of arms race. But it does get you thinking and does open you up to more ideas where you're less likely to get flat-footed if you've got more kind of creativity within your meta.
Yeah, and I would say I agree totally. And then I think also the level of players that you're playing with. You know, if you're playing in a group that's got 2 or 3 Grand Masters or even game designers that that jump in, that's a huge boost to help you out, because they got, like you said, they have a lot of insights, and they got an idea of some of the tricks. So you get a good look into the inner workings of it, I guess is a way to say it. Craig, how about you? What do you think on this one?
Yeah. So yeah, similar to everyone, definitely local meta shapes kind of practice and maybe why I end up taking. I think generally I ask my oppositions to take something like strong. So Gab was running that villagers Karen erosion list for a while I was using Shiho, and I just kept running into it until I could beat it, and that was really tough. But it did make my Shiho build much stronger by the end of it. So I think you definitely want a challenge, even if it's not particularly comfortable along the way. And I guess just to sort of get over the lack of kind of, because there's quite a few factions and now kind of almost like sub factions through the themes, to get across all of them is not really going to happen, but you can kind of help yourself out by playing some of those factions yourself. I find that's a bit like what Cody was saying, that kind of plugs a lot of the gaps for me, because I won't necessarily be able to face into them, but if I've used them quite a few times, then I'll be fairly comfortable with them. And then just one up if I can on Discord and sort of the latest rules, that kind of stuff sort of can help. But I think in terms of sort of, if you talk about kind of your local meta, that's sort of great and everything to help form your view. But actually, one of the things I would look forward to going to tournaments is to explore and see other people's kind of outputs from their metas and get a flavor from what's going on there. And I think that's maybe what Olaf was saying as well. So that can really complement and round out your general outlooks. I think some people, they kind of very much focus on one aspect of the game or find something that they think is particularly good, and it's just interesting to see how these kind of come together, where another community's sort of sussed out the game, solved the game in a different way, and see which way is kind of better on the table.
Yeah, that's what I think. Thinking on that and on how communities look at things, I think one of the things in 2022 Adepticon that threw us for a giant loop is our local meta pretty much just washed on Savage Wave. We're like, Savage Wave. Nobody likes it. And then all of a sudden we get into, we show up, going and running the Grand Master. I'm looking at lists. It's like Savage Wave. And it wasn't Bakemono. It was Oni lists, which we even thought less of in our local meta. Is like, Bakemono are okay, but nobody wants to play a Swarm list because you gotta, with the time constraints, blah 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 blah. So, but Oni, they're like, they're just going to get shot to death and it's not worth it. That's how our local meta felt about it. So nobody played it. And then Adepticon shows up. It's like Savage Wave Oni, Savage Wave Oni, Savage Wave Oni. It's like 5 lists out of 20. That year it was 24 or 26 players. Totally caught us off guard. Not as judges, it caught us off guard. As for players, it was a surprise, very much a surprise. So yeah, the local meta, being able to go to different tournaments and see that is great. And I think that's something here in the States we miss. We miss a lot because we don't have as many tournaments, large scale tournaments like you guys are having over there, where we can get that kind of experience. Your store tournaments are going to be able to be okay. And again, travel restricts things. Like I would love to drive up to Ontario and play in one of their tournaments, or not Ontario, Ottawa, Canada. But that's a 14-hour drive. So that's not happening. Or it's going to be a plane trip. And that's a whole different thing. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to go up now because it's Ottawa and it's Canada and it's January. It's not the Bahamas.
We're from Chicago. We'll be fine.
We'll be. That's a whole different level of cold up there.
It's okay. You put on an extra layer. You're good.
Put another layer on and an extra hoodie. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just buy some extra thermals. We'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to travel around a bit more to go to some of the European tournaments myself, because I think it is great to get out and about more if you can do that. And I've started to put on my own tournaments as well, at Warfare in the UK once a year, just because there's a reasonable number, but there's not like too many still. So I think it could probably, there could easily be more. It's not it's not like you could go to a tournament every weekend. It's not nowhere near like that level of popularity. But yeah, I think it's still, there's a good few fixed features on the list most years that you can get some tournaments at.
Yeah, it's. I'm on the same mind. I'd love to see more tournaments like that for sure. The local store tournaments are great. I know we're trying to branch in to do some of the local cons. So Adepticon's kind of the biggie. But in the fall, we have like 3 or 4 smallish, like 300-400 attendee level cons that we could do our events at. And I'd like to be able to do that a little more and have just to spread the game around, just to get new faces in, just to see what new people are thinking of and whatnot. Grandmaster Cody, how does your local meta affect your play style?
I hate my local meta.
I was going to say, let me get you your therapist chair, so that way we can listen. How does that make you feel? What does this Rorschach? What does this Rorschach blotch look like? And if it doesn't Wassapoo, then I don't know. I haven't.
It's Jason's privateer press dice, rolling 6s.
Yeah, no, seriously though, like our local meta scares me the most because I have to play with them, so we all know each other's ins and outs and how to tilt each other and all that fun stuff. But we also, like, other than me, because I just play whatever I decide I want to play for our normal game nights, but Jason and a couple of the other guys are always playing more of a higher level tournament style list. So we're always kind of playing, whatever, you don't count.
No, we already have talked about your issue. You coach people even at this point. You don't let people learn from their mistakes. You're like, oh, well, I've got the advantage here, and there's this really crucial moment. Oh, you have this rule. Oh, thank you so much for reminding me. Dead. That's usually what happens.
But for the most part, then, we're always playing at a kind of a tournament prep, tournament level play, even for fun. So
I think it just turns into that. It's not that you go into it playing that way. You kind of got to go.
We're just all competitive, and I think that's what drives our meta. And not saying that there's not other scary people over here in the U.S., but I don't want to go up against Jason or a couple of the other people. And then there's other people for other reasons, but we won't get into that. Yeah. But then aside from the local meta, I know Craig touched on it, but I really think Discord is another really good resource. Just looking for tips, tricks, rules, anything game breaking. That's where I learned about certain things with Hagane and other models before they were really brought to light. And then Longshanks. I love going on Longshanks and analyzing the UK lists and even trying them. I hate net decking people, but sometimes I like to run those lists and then change it completely, and I end up with like one model from the original list. But that's just my problem. So.
Now that's something I didn't think about. Was going and looking at the current, the most recent tournament and taking a look at the lists that are there and picking, say, oh, you know what, I kind of like that one, or I kind of thought Tengu would be kind of interesting, and going in, trying that particular thing. Does it fit your play style? Do I like how, do I have the models for it? And things along those lines, and
I've got the cool
usually,
thing. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, usually I like to look at like 4th or 5th place. Okay. Instead of like the top 3, just because usually those are the people that, not always, but they're kind of the second place, third place person, but they lost that last round maybe. But their lists always seem to be more interesting for some reason. I don't know. That's just something that I look at instead of, I always look to see who won, but I'm like, whatever. Everyone's going to play that. Let's figure something else out.
All right. Jason, what about you?
Just to feed off of just like looking at the list, I've been in an interesting position because I've had some people from the community reach out to me about my Adepticon Masters list, and I've gotten to see in a process in a small region in Germany that apparently I'm just going to say I've ruined, because even in their local tournament that they had, I think back in October, November, the person who I'd been communicating with, and then other people are like, yeah, like we're all like expecting this list at this point because that's what we all play in our meta. I'm like, oh wow, that's my mark on the world. I've ruined this small community forever.
Is it ruining or just making Silver Moon that much stronger?
It's 50-50 on that point. I'm not sure, but it's just been interesting seeing how that kind of stuff actually grows with it, because it's been interesting. But I do think though your local meta does kind of make or break it, and I'm talking more of like the caliper. Cody pointed out that for better or for worse, we are really competitive probably in our group. But at that point, it's kind of like steel sharpens steel kind of moments, where it's like we do have the more of the casual players in our group, and we do try to like take it easy, have fun, and do all those other things. But just by default, for a good chunk of us, it's kind of like we're in that like ready to go competitive mode. Go for it, just because why the hell not? Want to see how far we can push the limits. And I mean, me and Cody been playing forever. But even the other people who would be like newer for our group, I mean, at this point, we've known them for 4 or 5 years at this point. So you get some of that comfortableness where it's like, if we're just going at each other's throats for our list, it's like, that it's just like, we want to try it. But if you're in a much more lax group, casual, I think in a more casual, thank you. In a more casual meta, I don't think sometimes you get some of those things, or it's just like, oh, I saw this, but then I didn't really want to do this, or it's just kind of like, oh, we're good on this and that, where it's like, we've gotten it to the point now where it's like, in like our core meta group, where it's like, if we call a slip up or whatever like that, we just basically own up to it. It's like, yeah, no take back. It's like, yep, I screwed that up hardcore.
That's me on a regular basis.
And just, I definitely think that pushes us, or pushes those players in those types of groups just like way further along, especially once you start getting into like that, just any masters level or super competitive event. This is outside of Bushido. If you're playing in that group and you're just exposed to that all the time, I mean, if you're built for it, it's a huge benefit to you. And then sky is the limits as far as what you can come up with in some of the just creativity. But then but if it's just more from like a casual standpoint, sometimes it's where you just kind of got to pick and choose your battles, at least from what our pickings are for here on the state side. And I think part of it is that we don't have as easy of access to to like tournaments sometimes.
I would say large scale tournaments.
Large scale tournaments. So I think that's also where I think the Americans maybe were a little bit more ravenous for competitive stuff, because like, I can be aggressive American and get on the board and just play. So let's go.
Yeah.
All that pent up rage.
So I will say this: I like this discussion. This question was really nice because I learned a couple things. The Longshanks, I know Longshanks exist, but I never really think about using it as a source for data, and taking a look and giving ideas and whatnot. Discord, I always will recommend Discord. The one thing I'll say about the Bushido community is it is very, very welcoming. It is very encouraging. You got an idea, throw it out there. Some people may tell you it's not the best one, but they're going to help guide you to get to something better. So definitely make use of both of those resources as you're looking towards building lists for whether it's, local, if you're looking for fun casual and looking for a crazy idea, Discord's a great place to go for that. They'll give you they'll give you their craziest ideas and let you run with it. If you're looking for something a little more competitive and whatnot, Discord will still be able to help you out. And then seeing other tournaments and what happened out there too, that's always nice to have. I'm going to kind of move us into group 2 questions, but I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into it.
Uh-oh.
I was going to start off when we were talking about, because we kind of already stepped in there talking about the local meta, but I was going to talk about faction. But I'm going to save the faction question for a second. What I'm going to talk about what I'm going to throw out to the group here is, which do you prefer when you're building your list? When you're going into it and you're thinking about your list, do you prefer faction pure or Ronin when you're building? And I'll jump on Jason first because, well, I already know his.
I was going to say I would like to do some of the Ronin stuff, but it doesn't work well in some of the cases I've had with Silvermoon, or I haven't found it, or I just haven't found it work out well with me in some of the Ronin models that I end up picking up. So I'm much more of like, I'll play within my sandbox and I'll make everything work as best as I can with it. Mm-hmm. Are there some other options that would be really good with it? Absolutely. And I mean, before I actually started playing like more to the themes, and Cody would tell me, why the hell are you doing this? I'd be like, oh, I could take this as a theme, but I ended up breaking the theme rules because I wanted to take this because I thought it was cool. And it's like, can you substitute that with another model? I mean, I can, but I really want to try this and then end up losing or something.
That was early you doing themeless Silvermoon, and you were still pretty darn good with those lists, but you weren't getting any theme bonuses, so that wasn't But I mean, I do like the Ronin stuff, but I've always got I have the bitter tasting of all the Silvermoon Ronin players where it's like, oh, I'm Silvermoon too. Oh, well, let's see the Silvermoon player or all the Silvermoon models used. Oh, that's a Ronin. That's another Ronin. That's another Ronin. I'm pretty sure that's a Ryu model, and then everything Silvermoon is all your cards. So I mean, the Ronin have their own place. I think the Ronin have some really cool models. Mm-hmm. But I like to kind of just see each faction has their own cool things. And at this point, except for Kinshi, really, and I mean, Shiho is starting to fill out here now, most of the factions have a deep enough product line where it's like you can do 2 or 3 different things before you start doing some really weird, wonky mixing and matching stuff. Mm-hmm. So where it's like you have enough stuff where it's like you don't need to supplement it with the Ronin unless if you're like looking for something really cool or really specific, or that Ronin, or it's Great Pilgrim, and you're like, oh, I could take Great Pilgrim, and it needs to be in there to cover that one angle that maybe it's just like it's not covered by anything else you can do, which is still, again, you can still do it. All right, Craig, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Order for battle or faction pure?
Or
I shouldn't say order for battle. Ronin.
I'm
not trying to sway you one way or another. Ronin or faction pure.
He's not saying any names in specific.
I think generally when you start accessing Ronin, you're generally losing some theme benefit. That's how it generally should work. Mm-hmm. The more restricted the theme, generally the better the benefit. And once you start including Ronin, you probably have. I've gone for a theme that is, allows more in, or an actual faction theme that allows them in, or like Queen of the Waves or something like that. Or you've gone for an actual Ronin theme. So I think overall it should kind of self-calibrate. I think normally though, when you start to include Ronin, it's because you're trying to do something that the faction isn't perhaps well known for, or you're trying to do something a bit different, maybe shore up a weakness or add in a certain something very specific. I think generally that's what you're using them for. You're not usually using it just for line troopers and things like that, because generally your faction should be able to provide that, or you're just doing a general wrapper, and you're just trying to maximize your kind of flexibility in list building. So I think for me, I'm not too bothered about whether it's kind of like a theme, a faction kind of build or includes Ronin or not, or use a Ronin theme or not. I think it's just good in a way that you can have that flexibility and you can kind of keep thinking about your different builds. I must admit, I have used Order for Battle in the past, but I do, if I can, I would prefer to use the sort of the faction themes where I can. It's just often not as good. Order for Battle is just very good for tournament play, and it's hard to get away from that. The T-list format may change that, so that may well be, it either will make it even better or will counter it. We're not quite sure. So it'll be interesting to see where that comes in. I think strategic deployment always looked interesting, but I haven't seen executed it in quite the same way.
Yeah, I don't see strategic deployment. I see it most of the time, just from my experience of hosting and whatnot. When they're going Ronin lists, it's usually ordered for battle, just because it covers that idea. And you guys can throw in if I'm wrong on this. It covers that I have a weakness in this list, or this list doesn't do well in this particular scenario. And then having that sideboard where I could switch in a couple things or maybe a card, so that way I can cover up that weakness. And now suddenly it's great on idle, it's great on objectives, but wasn't good on zone control. But I could switch out these two pieces, and now bam, I'm not great at zone control, but I could be competitive in zone control, or I'm not as bad against faction X because I can make that switch. So that's why I think Order for Battle was always great. Now, for casual play, Order for Battle, you look at what's the advantage of that? Well, there is none. You just take Ronin in it, which is now they have they have a couple other Ronin themes out there, which I'm excited to see that they're developing, like the Hizomi family, the Kazumi family, and there's a couple others. Brotherhood. Having those themes that are kind of more Ronin based. I like that. It helps open things up for the casual player. So that's more of my line of why I like those. I will say some of those themes are pretty good for competitive play too. The Hizomi and Kazumi theme particularly could be pretty good. All right. So that's me diverting things, rolling a 6. Al, what do you think? Order for Battle or Faction Pure?
So I suppose I try to keep Ronin out of lists, not because I'm above writing degenerate lists, because I clearly am, but the only one that I've had to fall back on using Ronin was Minamoto, and it's just because their range is that much more limited compared to, in terms of both kind of options to play. And, like, a lot of the Minamoto models are Armor 3, limited range, and they tend to be quite resilient. But there's a lot of models like that, and you don't always want just a lot of models like that. You need something to fill in a gap, and that doesn't necessarily exist within the Minamoto range. So I think it's quite at present, and obviously that'll change, but at present, to write a Minamoto list that can thrive in a tournament environment would be more difficult if you're not going to utilize Ronin. The other factions, like if you're playing the Protector of Ryu, or if you're playing Ito, or if you're playing Temple, they've got a lot of models. They do a lot of different things. There's a lot of variety there, so you're less dependent on Ronin models. If you want to, splash something in there for a bit extra spice, or to serve some purpose, that maybe that you want a tank in Ito, then that's a poor example, because you can't actually access any Ronin. But the principle, like if you wanted a tank model in Tengu, for instance, then it might be there. That said, I can go either way. Like, my Rio list was ordered for battle just because the Rio list that it would have fitted into just didn't really provide any benefits because, as Craig said, the broader the theme, the weaker the advantages, and the advantages weren't strong enough to utilize it. It's like, oh, I'll may as well just take the flexibility of a card or a model swap in, which, to be honest, in the order for battles I've actually used, I've never actually changed the list up, but the option is always there. So, do I like to use Ronin? I try to avoid it. No, I don't try to avoid it. I just end up avoiding it. It's not an active.
Sure.
I just generally, there's models within faction that, and generally, if you buffing tends to be kept within faction within the models I play. I know, like in maybe like Silvermoon, you might be able to buff Ronin models more easily, but a lot of the like Order in Ryu or the benefits tend to be for other Ryu models. So when you begin splashing in Ronin, they become less useful. But that's not always the case. It depends on the faction you play.
Sure. No, I get it. It's the broader things. So for example, I always like playing when I'm playing Ito. I like playing Serpent's Coil, which allows you to use everything in the faction. So from a casual play standpoint, it's great because now I get some benefit and I can play with whatever model, and I'm going to get a couple little bonuses. But they're not earth shattering. They're not game breaking or whatever. But if I go into a tournament, yeah, maybe I want to take that. I get it. I want that order for battle because maybe I'll need to be able to shift it, and the benefits that I'm getting, just they may not amount to a whole bunch. Olaf, how do you feel about it? Not ordered for battle.
Ronin,
Ronin or faction pure?
When I build a list, I'm looking at what do I want to accomplish with it. Like, what is going to be my strength? What is it that I'm going to throw at my opponent? And if including Ronin makes that stronger, if it provides me a benefit, or if it's, it requires me to include a Ronin because I want a synergy between, I don't know, 2 models, 3 models, where one of them is a Ronin, then, I play with Ronin. If I can build a concept that doesn't require Ronin, then I obviously prefer to do an in-faction theme because it will give me some sort of benefit. Repeating what Al said, if there is a benefit from that benefit, I mean, you just, if there's no benefit, there's no reason to. But so I think if I look back, the lists I brought to tournaments, they have usually been Ronin themed.
Okay.
But it's not because I like the Ronin theme specifically. Like the last one, I played a Huzumi family, right? And my list was about using the Huzumi family theme benefits. That's where I started.
Sure.
I wanted to build something that was strong using that. And then from there, I developed what models are available to me. And then from there, I developed the concept. So, it was based on that. But most of my tournament lists have been generic Ronin themed because I'm looking for the synergies between models rather than building a list around the theme itself.
Okay.
Order for Battle is good. I agree. The flexibility it brings is good. But to be fair, most times I went to Order for Battle, I usually don't change that much.
I almost see it as like a fake out. I remember Craig, I think you mentioned it one time in an episode of Bushido Cast where like the sideboard is almost like faking someone else. Like, I got this right here. I could drop it. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not using this at all. I just want to just say I have something big. Like, look over here. I got this. And then you just win with whatever you have.
Yeah. And some people are really very creative. They put together their main list with stuff they're never actually, or sort of the, you write 100 rice and then you have 30 rice. The 100 rice, it will be a list that's intentionally kind of misleading because they'll never take that. they always swap out. I think most people just keep life simple. They would probably keep their main list there and share that with the opposition. But you can be smart and you can actually say, I'll put in this sort of distraction pieces and confusing pieces that are actually likely to be sideboard pieces and only be teched in on the odd occasion and things like that. So there's all sorts of things you can do with the Order of Valor if you want to spend time on it. And I must admit, I think I did leave in one character who never was going to get played, but had the fear that he could bring control and things like that. And so people would then bring in their tech piece that I was hoping would kind of, not be actually relevant and normally cost quite a lot to bring in something like that. So I was trying to get into a counter for Ordered for Battle, because otherwise I think it does give the greatest range and gives one the greatest benefits at the same time. So it does come across as very strong. But anyway, that was my attempt to try and kind of do something a bit different. That I'm not really sure if it really played into many of my games, but that was still the thinking behind it.
So all Ronin Silvermoon lists need to have Wasapu just on that sideboard there. Just be like, just the fact he's there. He's there. He could come out there, and that's enough.
Waiting to shoot you. All right, Cody. We'll end with you. Order for Battle or Ronin or Faction Pure.
I prefer Faction Pure. I do like playing with like 1 or 2 Ronin models to spice things up, or like in Jung, Teemo, he should be a faction model, but is Ronin.
Well, he was a faction model, wasn't he? And then they changed him to Teemu?
No.
Or changed him to Ronin? Him and Ashinaga Tanaga, they were both like actual Jung models, and then like in Risen Sun, they swapped them to Ronin.
I think Ashinaga was always Ronin, but anyway. So I prefer Faction Pure, and I do wish, that every faction will get a version of Serpent's Coil. I know Cult kind of has one now. Because like even my temple list that I won with, I took Ordered for Battle, not because I wanted to swap things out and stuff. It was just because I wanted to play, the monks with a Kawa no Rojin. Mm-hmm. And there's no list that allowed that. And so that was kind of why I picked Ordered for Battle. And I did end up swapping stuff out. But I really feel like that's more of a gotcha, because you kind of start to overthink. Mm-hmm. And you might not necessarily play that other model. Like for me, I had Kosuke and Tsuchiro. Those were my 2 swapping models. And I had a bunch of events, which whatever. But Kosuke was in there just because I finished painting him and he was cool. And I'd never played him before Adepticon, and he did absolutely nothing in the 2 games that I played him, where Tsuchiro literally saved my butt in the 2 games that I played him. So yeah, Faction Pure is the way to go, I think.
Okay. So 1 for Faction Pure, but I see the advantages of all of them. It's just kind of curious when you're going into the building process, which one do you kind of lean towards? And I think it's a little bit of personal preferences, a little bit like Craig said. How much of an advantage are you going to get by doing this particular faction theme, or does having that sideboard or something like that, or just even playing a Hizomi theme give you the Ronin figure, is that going to benefit you more? So kind of keep those things in mind as you're building. All right, sticking with the list building preferences, now we'll get into the actual group 2 question that we had. We've already talked about meta. We talked about whether you like Ronin or whatnot. So this is going to be the fun, controversial one. Which faction do you think is best which is the best tournament faction?
That's easy.
Well, then we'll start with Cody.
Temple.
Okay. I know why for you, but would you like to elaborate? Just because of Kata?
Well, no. A lot of it has to do with Kata, but then you also have a lot of strong 2 to 3 key models for disguise, opposed key tests, so on and so forth. And they also have a ton of base 4 dice melee models that are relatively inexpensive compared to other factions. They don't really.
Dare I say access to 6th Sense?
Yeah, that's a big one for me.
There's that too, but
we got a lot of stuff with access to 6th Sense.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I just think they're balanced. They don't necessarily have the armor to rely on, so that's where the ones do kind of save your butt. And I just think, in general, from a newbie to an experienced player, the temple, especially the monk side, always has a good tournament standing.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my vote.
Okay, Al, what's yours? What do you think is the best faction for a tournament? If I had to force you to one,
You are forcing him at this point. He's like, he doesn't want to answer.
Is that a single list or a double list format?
Single list format, because we don't know what
Single-
double list is looking
single
like right
list,
now.
no sideboard, no strategic deployment, just faction though. Faction, so you could build anything within the faction. Just which faction in general?
I don't know.
Silverman.
It depends. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, there's always like all these little modifications and changes and erratas that just keep things relatively fresh. They change the meta. To say which one is best is very difficult for me. I mean, of the ones I think of the factions I play, I would say Ryu. So
Okay.
I've got Tengu, Ito, Minamoto, Ryu, some Ronin. Is that everything? Hold on, I need to refer to my stuff. But I've got the Kitsune, so that's as close as I come to Temple. But they obviously being one of the oldest factions. They've got the biggest range. They've got a lot of kind of play options and things. They've got a lot of tricks and things they want to play about with. So if I were to force my hand and say this, which is the best of those, I would say Ryu has the most flexibility in terms of option of models. You've got hard-hitting samurais, you've got cheap guys, you've got abilities to give out orders. You have the most versatility of play style. So if you were forced into a situation where you can only choose one, that one gives you the best range of options.
Okay.
And
No, I like that idea.
Attack. You have
And you got
access to crit attack in
which
spades.
Yeah, crit attack's garbage, but nah, it's not. It's not garbage. It's very funny when it comes off, like, oh, success level 0, double 1. Very funny. But as a game mechanic,
as a game mechanic, it's not
rely
reliable.
On.
No.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Build a list around.
But no, I would agree. Ryu, that does not surprise me. I like Ryu. You know, because again, like you said, it's got a big depth of models to choose from, and you know, is it as strong in armor as Minimoto? No. Is it? You know, does I have access to rerolls? So I don't have kata like I do for Temple. For every give and take, it's your. I would say it's almost your
Space
dead
Marine.
center kind of faction compared to everything else to a certain degree. It has a little bit of everything. And then throw in crit strike. But I just say that because a lot of people like going to tournaments and play that crit strike thing because again, it's kind of like going to Vegas. If I'm hot, I'm rickrolling this tournament. But if I'm not, well, then you know I have fun with it anyway because everybody's scared to death that I'm going to pull that off. So yeah, I like that. I like that choice. Olaf, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Which faction?
It's a tricky question, as Al.
It is.
As Al says, it's so much down to what you're playing. Isn't there a saying where the best faction is always the one you're facing?
Yeah,
always better. Well, that's because I play Ito, so all of them are better than Ito.
I hear that a lot when people come against me with the Silver Moon. Like, God, why is Silver Moon so broken and awesome? I'm like, nah, there's something wrong here. It's taken me a while to get to this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm gonna go with the Silver Moon Trade Syndicate, but I'm not doing that because I think they are the best faction to win with. I think they're just the best faction to handle curveballs the best.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah.
You have my favorite event card in the entire game is Hidden Agenda. I bring it in every single Silver Moon list I play because the possibility to use that card to just put a wrench in the machinery of whatever people are throwing at you is just so juicy. And it puts you in a situation where Silver Moon Trade Syndicate just has a chance. It always has a chance to handle anything your opponent throws at you. It doesn't always work. I mean, the cards, they're not flawless, and sometimes you don't have enough and whatnot. But you're always putting yourself in a situation where someone brings something, and you're like, okay, this Rio machinery of order spamming is doom and destruction. And then you're like, or I just bring 2 event cards, put that wrench in there, and suddenly I'm hampering them to the extent that I'm actually able to play the game I need to play. Because to win, you got to play your game. You got to play the strength of your list, right?
Yes.
So I'm putting that out there. I think Silver Moon Trade Syndicate has the flexibility to bounce back in a really good way.
I totally agree with that. I mean, not just because I play against Silver Moon Trade Syndicate till it makes me sick, but
That's just game one.
It's the one faction. It's the faction that it could handle. It could handle the waves. And I used to explain it to people because at the local meta that we would have people like, okay, well, what are the different factions? Oh, this faction is this. This faction's the fast faction. This faction, this is the glass cannon faction. This is Minimoto. It's the one that's going to be able to take a beating and blah 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 blah. What is Silver Moon Trade Syndicate? I go, Silver Moon Trade Syndicate is the one if after turn 1 you want to dictate what your opponent is going to do, and they don't get the chance to do anything else. You play Silver Moon Trade Syndicate because they have the cards, they have the figures, whether it's changing people's dice rolls, whether it's saying, yeah, you know what, inside information, I'm going to have this guy go first, or hey, I'm going to play this event, and you go, hey, no, you're not. They really monkey with it. They're never really out of it. They may not always get you a 3-0 victory, but your opponent is going to be hard pressed to get that 1-0 or a 1-1 victory against you because they just have a whole lot of tricks and things that they could pull on you, and it makes them very solid.
Or
in
you
my opinion.
stop your opponent from getting those 3-0 victories where it's just like, wait, how did I lose that first scenario point? Or it gets to, or you somehow manage to sneak a scenario point off, and then that just throws that other person's tournament off because one victory point can be like, ah, crap. Well, that was me winning the Grand Masters right there.
Yeah,
just
because I snagged a point somewhere along the line.
Yep. We're going to pivot to Greg. Oh, go ahead, Olaf. Finish up.
So I'm going to retreat my point and say that they're not the strongest faction or the best faction, but they're definitely the most consistent faction, and that in itself is strong.
Yes. Perfect. That's excellent. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Craig, we're going to pivot to you. Which faction? We're going to put you in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's fine. It is a difficult question, actually. If you look at the range of factions going to most tournaments, is quite broad. There's not like many factions missed out on the bigger events. And it tends to be a couple of players for each faction, which is a good thing.
Yes.
And if I look at my own track record, I think I always take a different faction for an event. I don't think I've doubled up yet. But there's not that many events, so that kind of makes it a little easier. So I think there's I think there's a good argument for most factions. If I put on the spot which kind I am here, and from my own perspective, what I would normally go to is probably Cult of Ure, just because it's one faction which is, I think, like Al said, it's a large faction, so it's got a lot you can find in it if you need to. It can do a lot of different things. It's definitely got some weaknesses and some gaps, but Ronin can supplement you in some key places. And I think it's a lot of tricks in there. Generally kind of playing more of a debuff game, and I think if you know your stuff well, you can definitely make life difficult for your opposition. They're quite reliable. I think a bit like what we were saying about Silver Moon, because they've got some forgiving mechanics that can help models come back to life or get back up, that kind of thing. So that kind of does build in a certain level of resilience, because they can come back from an alpha strike or something like that, because they are kind of more of a sort of a long play kind of faction. But I think what's nice now is that they've actually fleshed out some of their scenario play with some of the newer models, Kozo in particular, and I think that's for me kind of really important as well. Can your warband do the scenario? And I think just making sure that you've got some models that can kind of get the objectives done as well is crucial. So they've got a really nice range now. I think for me that's what I would go to. But honestly, I think every faction has got a good viable tournament list in there. I don't think there's any that's particularly standing out as lagging behind at the moment. So it is more of a personal preference.
Okay, no, I could go get that, and it's interesting. I like the faction picks that we've had, and if you look at them, a lot of them, at least, and again, not saying that any of the other ones are any worse, but one of the things, at least I've heard, kind of consistency. Silver Moon to a certain degree, not so much. It's depth of the range. You know, the more variety you have, the more options you have, the better your choices, and they handle different things. Silver Moon is also one of those. It's got a pretty broad range too. It's got a lot of models to it. It's again one of those that's been around for a while. You know, Minimoto. Yeah,
weird.
So Jason, I'll finish off with you, and we'll let you.
I want to say Silver Moon is the best, just because if you want to troll someone the whole tournament, and you know what you're doing, yeah, Silver Moon's absolutely awesome tournament faction. Realistically, it's Temple Brocan.
That's our local phrase for it.
They are by far I would say the best tournament faction. Not showing the data or anything like that, like looking through Longshanks, which I could look through that probably too, and I mean, it probably would be something there, but just seeing from past interactions and then local meta and again the big tournaments, Temple does the one thing that Bushido is at its heart. How I see Bushido in its heart of hearts, how I view it, is a defensive game, and Temple Rokan does that to they can handle that and they can play the scenario very well. I would say their major weakness, besides damage output, which that can be an issue, but when they have options to just put people on their ass, okay, that I don't care about killing them. Their other really main weakness I've seen is, I use a lot of key. Okay, to me that's like the world's smallest violin. Yeah, you can't just use all your more awesome stuff or boost on two, but having access to kata itself and mitigating one of the biggest thing in ones in the game, that's also another big thing that I see. But Temple themselves can be very consistent. They can play defensively, which is encouraged in Bushido, how I've kind of just seen it from experience. And they play really well the scenario. You could take it with villagers, you could take it with the monks, you could do the Kitsune is a little bit of a different flavor, I would say, with it, but they play really well to all scenarios in the current scenario format. I just really can't say that there's something that they can't do. They are like the Swiss Army knife of Bushido, and they're a good Swiss Army knife. They're not like the cheap knockoff ones that you find here at like Walmart.
And Longshanks agrees with you.
Okay. I wasn't sure. The only reason why I thought Silver Moon might be higher is because of the Ronin Silver Moon swap. So that's why I thought it would skew the numbers to say Silver Moon. But otherwise, like I said, and I think the last year or the last UK Grand Masters was like out of the top 5, 3 of them were the four of them were the Temple Masters of the Temple before they
was Temple, man.
That monstrosity should have never existed.
I know, but I mean, it made its point, and I mean, even if you didn't take it as that, previous tournaments, I mean, Temple has always done you have a consistent standing, and I can't imagine that there's been a tournament where a Temple player did not at least one Temple player did not finish in top 3.
I'd say top 5 maybe, but not top 3.
I'd say top. No. I'd say top 3.
You said that defensive play is almost encouraged. What do you mean by that?
Bushido encourages you to be more defensive. I feel like there are benefits to being offensive and attacking in the game, but Bushido as a whole, it does encourage, at least how I've seen it and kind of my experience playing with it, it encourages you to be much more reserved because it statistically you just end up better with it. Depending on the situation where it's like you need to take that hit, you're almost playing to the point where it's like I'm only being attacking when I know statistically my opponent has to do this, unless if they can change something like using Asp Strike, Lightning Reflexes. So it's much more
Lowering the dice or
beneficial
things
to
like
me. It's much more beneficial to me to be defensive in the game, and then that's when you start having like special attacks or defenses to kind of add in those other levels to kind of help you out a little bit. So that's where I say kind of Bushido as a whole is it's encouraging you and it's rewarding you for being much more defensive than taking on those offensive moments, unless if like for sure like, okay, my opponent is down to 1 die, or I've gotten it to the point where I'm getting an extra die. Yeah, I'm gonna go in for the kill, because unless if they can outspeed me and they're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna Lightning Reflexes you or Asp Strike you, or to strike first. I mean, they're going to put that die in defense, so I have no reason not to go all out, because 1 in 6 chance that they're going to roll a 1, and congratulations, I just killed it.
Yeah,
interesting. I don't hold to that. I
Okay.
generally make quite aggressive lists to do damage. Certainly, the very first Minamoto one was all based around the application of damage, but I suppose you can afford to roll those dice when they do attack you, with reach or Asp Strike and things like that. But I would consider my play generally to be pretty aggressive. And
no, I'm not saying that individual players can't be aggressive, but it's just how I've seen a lot of things with Bushido. It rewards you for being almost defensive more than aggressive. That's just how I've kind of seen it, and as I've kind of gone along with things, you get a more of a reward for that, or I see more reward for it that way.
No.
Or it's just Lungar, I suppose.
There's too many times, even when the game is so swingy, it doesn't matter. You can throw all your dice in defense and roll triple ones, and you're screwed.
Unless
you got
on you all the time.
Defense 3.
And you also have the aspect that if you're the one defending all the time, then you're the one losing,
right?
Because you're allowing your opponent to slowly whittle you down because you're not attacking. So you're giving the tempo over to your opponent.
Remember, he has access to defensive throw, so
Yeah, I was going to say I have access to some ways.
Is that really
people.
defensive?
I have some ways to put people in prones and then build
here.
myself up to it. So I'm not saying, and I don't disagree that there aren't ways for you to start taking that initiative, but I just see it that there's much more of a reward for you being more defensive, and then you get to kind of start just hitting at it. So it's kind of almost like seizing. It's like the chopstick and the fly moment. You're waiting for that opportune moment to grab the fly with the chopsticks, with Karate Kid, but I just see that you get a lot more benefit being defensive until you find that moment to attack, versus unless if you've got that backup with Minimoto armor, Ryu armor, even to an extent, where it's just I'm gonna go for this and we'll see what happens from here.
It's a question of how risk averse and when you put the risks, right? I mean, you do benefit for being risk averse, absolutely.
Okay.
And if that is playing defensively, then I agree with you.
I guess maybe that's the better way to put it. I'm not very good with my vocabulary, so that's why I just said defensive versus risk averse. I get risk averse is the more correct way to put it versus saying defensive. But
Jason's native language, English, is a third language.
I don't even know what the second language is at that point.
Neither do
I
I.
know what the
That's what I'm
second
trying to
language
figure
is.
it
I don't know
out.
what the primary language is.
It's somewhere in between. It's Spanglish.
If you put it that way, you make a point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more the correct way to look at it for what I'm trying to get out there. So thank you, Olaf, for translating that for everybody else to understand what the hell I'm actually saying.
Thank you. You are now gaming Jason's official translator.
Thank God, finally.
All right, we had another part two. Now they decided to change that. I was going to ask a question about Elite versus Swarm list, but I think we're going to pass that so we get some questions from
Swarm.
the Swarm. Yeah, we'll go quick. Okay, Swarm, rather than Elite.
In the middle. Nothing. Neither.
Yeah, I was gonna say Swarm is definitely it, even though for like what you would think of more of the swarmy stuff, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to manage it. But if you come to a tournament and you know how to manage your swarm list, yeah, good luck. You will go far.
You can do
No less than
very well.
5. That's my minimum. No less than 5.
List
Yeah.
of 5. Okay.
No less. No less.
No less than 5.
No
You
less
can't
than
do-
5. So you're
you
not
can't do the
doing you're not
ninjas?
doing a Ninja 4. No.
It's just
Not playing Ninja. Don't play Ninja.
Just say no. Do you
Ninja
even
4.
know you're
Not
playing
even
a
one.
Ninja list?
I want to keep winning games. Don't play Ninja.
Craig, how about you? Swarm or Elite? What size is your sweet spot for building a list? Number wise, figure wise.
Probably about 7.
7
something
figures.
in
Okay.
that in that kind of region is about right. I think any more you're starting to go on the slightly larger side, which is fine. I don't often go much lower than that because I think then you don't maybe have enough activations to kind of manage the opposition warband and get the scenario achieved, which is the key thing really, scenario play. So yeah, very much mindful that someone needs to be doing that.
Okay. Cody, what about you?
Swarm.
What's your sweet spot number for a list?
I'd say 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah, because the same thing that Craig said, but you're playing those 4-5 model minimum list. It hurts when you have someone like Master Shi turning an idol because you've got other stuff tied up, and he needs to, and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay. Olaf, the sweet spot for numbers.
I didn't know that 7 models was Swarm, but I guess I'm around there as well.
I would say, I mean, that's like what you're jumping.
I think
off
that's the
point,
minimum
getting
of
into
Swarm.
is
Right.
like
I'd say 7 was average.
Swarm
light.
light. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
No, I
God,
guess I'm just looking at the possibilities of swarming with Silver Moon with all the animals, and I'm going like, 7 is not a swarm. Come on.
Oh no, Olaf, you have to tune
Well,
in.
that's where we're at it.
Gang war. That's my own invention of gang war. I didn't do it with the animals. I did it with as many Shite as I could shove into a list with Rocky.
Yeah.
It was awesome
Nice.
until the 4 list ninja faction ripped it apart, and this was before
Yeah.
House of Bleeding Moon. I was just like, oh man.
What just happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. I was like, I don't know what happened. Like, I thought I had it on the numbers wise. Nope, Katsumi's like, yep, dancing through with Rin and everything else. And it's just like, damn.
Every move was a kill, even if you were attacking.
By the end of turn 2, I had lost 5 models. I think.
It was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath.
It was a very humbling moment when I was like, activation economy, I got this down and lock. It doesn't matter if you have I'm forgetting tireless. And it's just like, yeah, oh crap. Well, I just lost 5 models by round 2. I did something wrong.
Yep. All right. There we go. We got questions. So questions from the group. We're going to start here with one of the big questions was, big one for me is, do you design a list around scenario play or to cover your faction's perceived weaknesses? And we want to take a shot at it, or do I have to roll the die?
I can go first on that.
Okay.
And the temple list that I won with, and I'm bringing something very similar this year, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And how I designed it, I think it has 8 models, so 1 over my sweet 7. But I've got a couple of my designated scenario go-getters. That's their whole job. The whole point of them in the list is to do scenarios and pray that they don't get engaged. When I've got the beaters or the whatever I need to tie stuff up, like the Kawa no Rojin, Suchiro, stuff like that. And I've got the support piece, Aiko, Koji's pack, and so it's just kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, essentially. And that's kind of what I go at. I want to make sure I have all the scenarios covered, so I can do idols, I can do zones, but I also don't want to be super weak and have too many support models or too many support models and nothing on the front line.
So. The classic Silver Moon problem. I took too many points in support.
There you go. Craig, what about you? Scenario? When you're designing a list around scenario play or to cover faction weaknesses, or like Cody said, it seems like a little bit of a blending of both. I think you can't get around.
Yeah, I think scenario play is always top of my mind when I'm building a list. Make sure it can actually win the game. Otherwise, you're just doing something interesting. which is fine. But you're trying to win for at these tournaments, so that comes to top of my mind. So I think with the list I won with, actually Waku was doing a lot of the scenario. Generally, you just sucking up activations as the Blood Brothers were managing to take models out, and then would be able to kind of go around, maybe finish a model off if needed. But really, so many activations could actually just go around and score lots of scenarios for me. Turn idols or whatever. So yeah, I think it's really important to keep scenario play in mind, and maybe that's one of the things. Sort of talking about kind of metas and things like that. I don't know if this helps, but we always randomize our scenario. So we don't just like play a set kind of like idols or whatever, because I mean often when you're list building you come up with a list that's like, you just have like, I don't know, maybe a scenario or two in mind, and then you roll up a completely kind of one that you don't use so regularly, and suddenly it's all out the window, and you have corner deployment and you haven't really thought about that or whatever, because like there's so many different configurations. So I think that's really helpful, just to kind of sort of test your list under all those different kind of different parameters that kind of can come up in a tournament. But then a lot of that comes down to more scenario play. I think the faction weakness is generally something you may be able to mitigate a little bit through running, but often strengths and weaknesses are kind of quite closely related. So I think for me that's less of a challenge.
Okay. Good. Olaf, how about you? Scenario, when you're building, are you looking scenario play or covering up a weakness?
If you're not bringing anything to the scenario, you will lose, obviously. But covering up weaknesses, no. You gotta build towards your strengths. You gotta figure out what is your list supposed to do. How is it gonna win? Not how is it gonna avoid to lose. If you're trying to avoid to lose, you're gonna lose. So to win, you gotta have something that deals with the scenario, and you gotta have the aspect of your list that allows those things to deal with the scenarios. Like Cody mentioned, he's bringing a bunch of stuff that he hopes it's not going to get engaged, right? Because then it gets to do the scenario. But for those things not to get engaged, you got to have something that protects them. And I think that part is the most important part of list building. What is going to give you, what's the word? What is going to give you presence on the board? What is going to allow you to control the necessary regions, positions? What is going to make sure that you'll get to the scenario that your opponent's not pushing you off them, getting to your scenario runners and so forth. And so when you're looking at what your faction is bringing, then your question should be, what in my faction allows me to get a board presence, to get can't remember the word for it.
Okay.
But what gives you control of the game, and how are you going to achieve that? How does your faction do that?
Perfect. Let's go, Jason.
I played, or my list building is to scenario. The game is a scenario game, which I think you've told me multiple times. It's a scenario-driven game. Play a scenario. Also, playing Silvermoon, there's probably a bunch of weaknesses and bad counters that come up to it. So if I was going to try to design a list to cover my weaknesses, it would be, okay, you're going to stay in the bag. I'm going to go play another faction, because there are quite a few... there can be quite a few issues that come up where it's like, oh, well, how do I deal with fear? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? And eventually then I run into the classic Silvermoon problem. All right, so I took 87 points in support models. I'm good. All focused into this Buto. Let's go. And then the Buto dies, and I just got a bunch of weak support models. Like, oh my God, what do we do? And I only move speed 3, so I can't even get to an objective to turn it. God forbid. So if you're building a list, I think in general, focus on what you can do within the best of whatever your faction you're playing to cover your scenario play, and then everything else will just kind of fall into place. Because especially I'm repeating myself. Certain factions just have a lot of obvious weaknesses, and it's just like if you're trying to cover that, you're going to be like, I am not going to play this faction. I'm going to go find something else to go play.
Okay.
And then rush to paint it all if you have your Adepticon painting requirements, and then it's like,
get it all painted in time.
Where's my spray paint? I'm just going to spray paint it 3 different colors, and we're good to go.
Yeah, 3 lines.
Contrast paint made it easy.
Oh yeah, it definitely made it easy, but still.
All right, Al. How about you? Are you building for scenario play or covering the weaknesses? What's your kind of first and foremost in your mind when you're doing that list building?
The answer's violence, and
there you go.
always is. And everyone else is wrong. Scenario plays for losers.
Kill everything, and then it's easy to achieve the scenario.
He's not wrong.
I joke, but like the Benimoto list, its initial conception was not scenario play. It was dominate the mid board, murder anything that comes close, and win scenario that way. Because if they can't reach scenario or they can't fight around scenario, then it's much easier for you to manipulate it. And it did that relatively well. The realist, it was very strong in scenario, but really that was just a bait to make people come in, stop you scoring a scenario, and then be murdered. So again, with that in mind, the Ito list and my Kitsune list, they were much more kind of scenario based. I didn't win the Masters with those, so that tells you the answer. Murdering people is the way forward.
Murder first, scenario second.
I thought it was murder small children and animals first, and
that's our local meta solution to the game. Is if it's a small
I'm the reason that they have everything, Olaf, and again, the YouTube videos are plenty to show. So that's just a briefing. Yeah, it gets much further down.
Murder the children even falls into cult. I mean, if there's a small child on the battlefield, you're like, I think that thing's going to die because it's going to be something.
Then recycle them. That's fine. Right. So, yeah. I mean, this depends how you want to build your list. I mean, you could literally build lists that are like almost all, I'm just going to roll defense dice forever. I've got enough models to play a really strong scenario game. You play Bakemono, I suppose. You play War Weary, you're manipulating scenarios turn 1, and you're just rolling defense dice predominantly. That's definitely an option. But I prefer to go after aggressively the models that I don't like, or not necessarily kill, but maybe control if they're beyond being easily downed. Whether that's with terrain or abilities or key feats or however what you have available to you within faction. But predominantly, I like having a strong scenario presence, but I often seek to aggressively snipe out what my opponent has to win games with.
That makes sense. All right, some other questions from the audience here, from people who sent them in. Let's go with this one. This is a good one. Once you get to the final rounds, so you're at the top table or top 2 table, how do you calm your nerves and focus? What works for you when the nervous starts going with knowing you might win this thing? So basically that pressure's on, you're at the top table, there's at least 7 different people watching you as their games have ended early, and one judge just hovering around, because. How do you handle that? Let's go with, we'll go with Craig.
Yeah, I find it quite nerve-wracking. I find the whole tournament thing a bit nerve-wracking to start with, to be honest. Until you start talking to people, and then you calm down a bit. Yeah, and I think that's how a lot of people are. But I think the main thing is once you get there on the day, you have some fun. Even if, and actually, I found all my games on the top tables have been very, very. Good kind of civil, smooth, fast games, and no real rule issues or anything like that. Just very much kind of getting on with it. And often, I suppose, once you're kind of playing at that kind of level, there's normally a thing each list is trying to achieve. And if your thing works and theirs doesn't on the day, then you'll come out on top. But it's often down to a very kind of slim margin of kind of decisions and dice rolls that could swing it either way in most games. I think so. I think it's it's important just to enjoy it and try to have small talk with your opposition still. But it is quite difficult not to lose your lose sight of things and let the kind of excitement take over. Yeah, it's not easy. Not easy. It's a bit of pressure you put yourself under. That's all.
Definitely, yeah. Watching everybody play, I could see there's some that handle that pressure well, and then there's others that's just like, if you could, if you just go in and remember, hey, it's a game, and I'm gonna have fun with this, and hey, I made it to the top table in the first place. That's an achievement in and of itself. Getting that extra yard over, if I could make that, great, and hopefully that doesn't, stress you out too much. Grandmaster Cody, how about you? How do you handle the pressure? We know how you did it in Moonstone.
Oh, okay, that's a dick move.
But yeah,
I was
for
gonna say,
those
should a
of you
group
that are
that doesn't
familiar with
know?
our show, that last year's Adepticon, Grandmaster Cody,
I took a
His
to go to the
brain just
hospital. You had
decided to
you had to have the
reset.
paramedics come and get him.
Yeah,
that was weird, but it wasn't because of the pressure or anything. I don't know what that was, but anyway,
your body just decided to do that blue screen of death for Windows, and
Just
then
a reset.
it reset itself.
You just had to
Yeah,
toggle
pretty
the on-off switch on you.
I had like 400 windows open. Anyway, so honestly, the top table for me wasn't the most stressful game.
Okay.
Well, for my turn, the one that I won, game 2 and game 3 were the most stressful. Usually though, I feel like game 1 and game 3 are the kind of the turning points, because game 1 it's like, okay, I need to 3-0 just to even have hopes and dreams, basically.
Mhm.
Not always the case, but then game 2 is kind of like, whatever, feel good. Game 3, it's like, okay, if I 3-0 here, I'm like top table or in contention, so that's also usually where the fatigue starts to set in and start making stupid mistakes. And then game 4, it's just like you said, Greg, it's made it to the top. Cool. It's just another game. I try to not think about the prize. Because for Bushido, being able to make your own character is one of the coolest prizes ever.
Mhm.
But that adds a lot of extra stress. So it's like, yeah, let's not think about that and get worked up. So I usually take a deep breath, drink water, and then just roll dice.
There you go. Olaf, how about you?
Yeah, I would say that you don't handle it. Game 4, and at least up until this point, you've been playing now 3 games in a row. This is your 4th one. You have been trying to focus maximally all this time. You're tired, probably even close to exhausted. And you've already noticed yourself starting making mistakes, because that's how it works. So if you can hold on to the idea, and that's what I try to do, that you're there to play for fun, that you're there to play for good games and for the challenge itself, rather than seeing the victory as the goal, that helps a lot. I travel to international tournaments to play Bushido because I don't have a very consistent local scene, and that helps me in the sense that I know I'm enjoying myself regardless of how that last game ends up. So that's good. But yeah, I guess practice, be playing games in stressful positions after playing three entire games. Once you've done that a few times, I suppose you get better at handling the pressure and the stress.
Yep, I would say, yeah, definitely. The more you get accustomed to it, the more it's not going to be a thing. But yeah, if and I think you hit it on the head. If you're not playing a whole lot of Bushido, you're playing the game that you love. You're at the top table. This is a good thing. This isn't something you should be stressed over.
Yeah, this is potentially the best game I'm going to have this tournament.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's something to be proud of, something to be happy about, and just enjoy it. Absolutely. Al, how about you? How do you handle stress? You just don't get stressed, right? It's not a thing.
That's it, basically. Yeah, be a sociopath.
So, Jason.
It's exposure, isn't it? Like you've played a bunch of games. The more time you spend at the top tables or doing well in tournaments, the less these things potentially bother you. I've done quite a wargaming for a lot of years now, because I used to play back in like War Machine, like high level events and things. So we've done a lot of kind of competitive gaming. And again, it's the exposure to that. I suppose it depends how, like for me, like I am a paramedic, so like a lot of kind of potentially like stressful environment things. I suppose if you put things in perspective, winning toy soldiers probably it doesn't matter too much. Like if you lose it at the end of the day, but like I said, like winning Bushido tournaments is a wee bit special because like you get that opportunity to build and develop like a part of the game.
Yeah.
Where that's not the case in other sort of game systems. So it means maybe a wee bit more to people. But yeah, I mean it's exposure. It's exposure to being in stressful situations that diminishes the overload and the stress that comes with it. But it never goes away entirely. Like if you really want something, if you really want, opportunity, got a great idea for a game in mind, a model in mind, you do want it, like, and it never goes away entirely. You can diminish it, and you can have better reactions to that sort of stressful environment, or to that moment, but it never goes away entirely.
Okay, Jason, how about you? Why can't I hear you?
My bad. I hit the switchboard on. So I mean, for me, well, I've been playing tabletop games or whatever since I was like in middle school, elementary school, and getting my butt kicked against the college kids playing Pokemon cards where I couldn't read. I mean, to help calm the nerves, I mean, it sounds weird, just let them out however you can. My big thing is like my leg and my knee tend to go up and down, like those little reactions that go through it. But the more you play, the more you enjoy it. I mean, just go with it. If you are so inclined, take advantage of your lunch, make sure you have a good lunch, and like down a shot of tequila or something, or just
calm the nerves. There you go.
Put some alcohol in your system. I mean, I would not recommend it round 4. Because if the game goes longer, that alcohol might get into your system a little bit too much. You're like, oh crap, wait, what did I do? Especially if you're a lightweight, and let that kind of maybe help ease your nerves if you really, really need to. Otherwise, just enjoy yourself. I mean, you do get a really cool prize for this. Everybody's going to be nervous. Your opponent's going to be nervous, but how you can direct those nerves, I mean, will kind of actually help you better in the game, because if you can control your nerves better than your opponents can in some cases, that it's like, hey, you're gonna go for it. When I won the Masters at Adepticon, I mean, like, I was like, I hit that second win moment, and I'm a distance runner, so like I know that moment. But I sat down for round 4, I'm like, oh, I hit this second win moment, like I'm ready for round 5 and 6. I know this ends here at round 4, but if we gotta go to round 5 and 6, I am ready to go. And just you hit that point and it's just like you're good to go. So if you can figure out, if you can manage your nerves however you can, whether that's fidgeting with something, if that's moving your leg up and down, if that's literally stopping in your 2-minute activation to breathe for 10 seconds and like, all right, let's go, I got this. This is something to help you reset yourself and you're good with it. If you are so inclined, to have a flask with you too and take a drink, but like I said, I would not recommend.
If your tournament venue allows such, let's throw that out there.
I'm sorry, yeah. Adepticon is very. We'll say they have a front-facing policy of no, not allowed.
No outside alcohol.
No, I'm sorry, no outside alcohol.
That's never going to happen.
Okay.
There's so much outside alcohol at that place.
I can't.
They can open a liquor store. They can open a liquor
distribution warehouse. There's so much booze there that's outside. Anyway,
but that's my end all be all statement.
Okay,
just let it out and you're good to go.
That's good. Well, we are over 2 hours, so I'm going to hold good. We may not have gotten all of our questions in, but I think we covered a lot of good ground. I think we got a lot of good information. So, gentlemen, I thank you all so much for joining us. Really appreciated the insights. Hopefully, you guys also enjoyed it too. Hearing some insights and jokes, and hopefully, we could get us all together again, and we can hear about what's going on, what happened at the Grand Masters in the UK. With that being said, I'd like to say, hey, if you haven't heard already, check out Bushido Cast. They have some great information, especially if you're a competitor or casual player. I would highly recommend listening to their podcast. Good stuff there. Lots of good information. Make use of it. And if you haven't already for Gaming with the Guys, hey, what do you get if you subscribe? Absolutely nothing. But we would appreciate that subscription, and definitely give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. That way we'll get an idea of, hey, maybe we'll try this again. Maybe we'll try it with people from further around the world, just so we can make coordinating times that much more difficult for us.
Yeah.
We wanted to get Australia in, but they just don't have Grand Masters yet. So hopefully they'll be able to get that in the near future.
They have Tim Tams, though.
They do have
they
Tim
do have
Tams.
Tim Tams.
Those are so good. It's a cookie. It's a biscuit.
I'm noticing none of the guys from Europe too. Either you guys have something better than Tim Tams, or you've not experienced them.
I don't think we've experienced Tim Tams.
It's diabetes in a package. It's amazing.
It's like an Oreo cookie, but covered in chocolate and better.
And I think there's like nougat in it.
Some kind of filling.
Or
It's
like
good.
a chocolate mousse or something.
It's delicious.
I ate like 2 packs of them. So
anyway, thank you all again for joining us. For you who are watching, thank you so much for watching. We do appreciate that. Again, subscribe, like, do all those good things, so that way we'll keep on keeping on with this show. And until next time, everybody have a great day or evening, wherever you may be. Bye-bye, everybody.
So.